Who is old enough to recognize that sound? Guys, after many, many years, 34 years to be exact, AOL is discontinuing its dial-up internet service. Oh, man. End of an era. End of an era. AOL, baby, you know. I was like, man, I might age myself with this one. Crazy, though. After 34 years in operation. No longer. I'm sure many people have never heard that sound before. You know what? I remember the AOL days, the AOL Instant Messengers, AIM days back in middle school. Man, what a time to be alive. Guys, what a time to be alive now. We have some crazy trends that bode really well for DePIN right now. I'm going to show you what those look like. If you were paying attention over the course of the weekend, Bitcoin, man, just in the last 24 hours, had a nice little run. Ethereum running hard. We're seeing the things that we want to see that would lead up to alt season. Will we see it come to fruition? That's the question, right? But let's get into some other news before we get into the crypto news, of course, and the DePIN trends that I'm talking about. This was an interesting story I saw. We can click over to this. Check this out. Talk about AI.
School in Texas.
Teachers.
There is a school in Texas that only has 2 hours of class per day, is taught by AI, and has no teachers. And the results are kind of scary. Students at Alpha School are testing in the top 1 to 2% nationally. In fact, it's been so effective that they're now expanding across America to Florida, Arizona, California, and New York. The students are learning academics through AI tutors, which give them a one-on-one personalized curriculum. And after their short morning academic block, the rest of the school day is spent learning real-world skills like public speaking, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy. They also built a school in Brownsville, which is one of the poorest school districts in the country. And the students there demonstrated 2.1 times faster learning compared to national norms. So the question is, should more schools around the country adopt this approach, or is this something that could never work for larger schools?
Very interesting stuff there. I mean, I think there's one thing that's clear. The current system has not been working. The U.S. is ranking in one of the worst out of all developed countries in our education system. That's not a dig on teachers. I think teachers are vastly underpaid. They need to be paid a lot better, but could we use AI tools to start augmenting that? And, instead of having kids in a classroom for 6-7 hours, 2 hours spending on this, and then they said doing actual activities the rest of the day. Could that be a better way? I think so. I mean, I think the standardized testing in the system we have today obviously has not been working all that well. So pretty cool stuff. Just another way that AI could be making a difference in our lives. There's a report earlier that the Grok account is suspended. I did look, and it looks like it's back now. So I don't know what happened there, but y'all remember that Grok has been had some interesting times recently. Started going off the rails, saying some weird things. So I don't know if something else was about to pop up. They shut it down to fix it or whatnot, but it seems to be back up and running again. Some other news. Apparently, we aren't tariffing gold anymore. Just another example of things changing every minute. So this was something we reported on Friday. It looked like we were going to put some tariffs on gold. It did push the price of gold up quite a bit, only for Trump to come out today and say, no, we're not doing that anymore. And as you see, the price of gold has come down a little bit over the last day. Still up. If you look on the year, though, man, looked pretty good. Almost as good as Ethereum. It was 24.47 earlier, about a year ago, actually, last August, and it has just been on a steady rise. Look at that drumbeat for gold. Not to say we won't have corrections along the way, guys, but I think gold is a very, very good hedge against all of the reckless fiscal policy around the world. Does not seem to be going anywhere, does not seem to be getting any better. Gold and Bitcoin, baby. There was an article that came out talking about how Intel, IBM, and Google are halting thousands of future hires as AI is poised to reshape careers, automate tasks, and transform the workforce dynamics. said that Unusual Whales is the one that first shared this. Said that while not many sources back up the leak's plans of Intel, IBM, and Google freezing thousands of new roles for artificial intelligence, the claim supports what the industry has been reporting about the broader trend, with resource allocation shifting and workforce strategies being reorganized. So something that came up on our space last week, one of the spaces I was on, about how maybe we won't see it like just completely replace jobs, but it will certainly augment jobs to where maybe you don't need 10 employees. Maybe you can have 2 employees that are a lot more efficient. But the other thing is that it will kind of free people's time up to be more creative and work on actual things instead of the arduous, answering of emails and a lot of the tasks that, frankly, just people don't find, I don't know, much happiness in. I read a book earlier this year called Deep Work, talking about how employee satisfaction has fallen off a cliff because we don't find meaning in what we do at work anymore. And I think that AI could help with employee morale because it could open up our time to do things that actually matter, that we can kind of feel more whole about. In that book, they talked about how in like trades skills and building things back in the day, like people actually felt like they were accomplishing things. Now we just do all these mundane tasks where it's like, yeah, you can like answer a bunch of emails, you can get that off your your to-do list, but does that really make you feel like you've accomplished anything? So I think this is like really, it's going to be an interesting conversation over the coming years about how AI does change the workforce. And I don't think it's all bad necessarily. Let's talk about some possible catalysts. Guys, there's a lot of cash on the sidelines right now. Warren Buffett, obviously, with Berkshire Hathaway is one of those examples that a lot of people give. They're currently sitting on $347 billion. But when you look at money market funds, up to $7.15 trillion sitting on the sidelines right now, it kind of makes you wonder, what's it going to take for them to pour that money into the markets? Because markets are, let's be real, when you look at it, at least from when you're looking at the multiples and the valuations of some of the companies right now, they're right in line with what we saw during the dot-com era where things were like super overvalued. So are these people, that are sitting on this cash right now, are they just kind of waiting for a correction? What's it going to take for them to pour that back into the markets? That's the real question, because we've been seeing a lot of insider trading, a lot of insider selling from these different publicly traded companies. Retail has kind of been pouring in and keeping the market up where it is. What's it going to take? Because this is a lot of money sitting on the sidelines, between money markets, Warren Buffett, who's I think the largest Treasury holder with Berkshire Hathaway right now from an institutional perspective. And then can we continue to look at valuations the way we have in the past? I think one of the things people need to realize is that there's so much more money in the system. So much money has been printed. Do we need to completely reevaluate what type of multiples make sense in the stock market? It'll be interesting to see these money market funds, if they continue to build, or, when we see a crash, which I think will happen at some point, is that what they're waiting for, to pour that money back into the stock market? And there's a couple of things to really pay attention to, which we've talked about a little bit, but the CPI data is coming out tomorrow. That's the inflation data. So this is going to be really important to keep an eye on. It says that it will have, it'll be critical in the shaping of the outlook for interest rates from the Fed Reserve's meeting in September. So there is no FOMC meeting until September. There's not one in August. Says that right now, economists are forecasting July CPI will come in at 2.8% annually. So we look at this. That does coincide with what we're seeing on Polymarket right now. 2.8% is the most likely scenario for tomorrow for the CPI print. At 45%, there is still about a 35% chance that we come in under that. That would obviously be very bullish for markets, and the chance and likelihood of a rate cut if inflation comes in below. Obviously, if it comes in hot, that would not be good. So expect volatility potentially tomorrow as we see those CPI numbers come in. The other thing it called out, and we talked about this before too, is there is the Jackson Hole meeting in Wyoming that Fed Chairman Jerome Powell will be at. They'll be having discussions that will very likely give us a lot of insight into what to expect as far as rate cuts moving forward for not only September, but the rest of the year. Here we go. So again, that is August 21st through the 23rd. So that is about a week and a half. So those are the two big things to keep an eye on tomorrow: CPI print in this Jackson Hole summit that's coming up in August. If we look at what the chances are of rate cuts, according to Polymarket right now, there is still a 79% chance looking in September, that 87% by October, and 92% by December. So there's really a question of how many rate cuts will we see. There are a lot of people saying, calling for 50 basis points or 0.5% potentially in September. I think a lot of that, again, will be determined by what the CPI numbers look like tomorrow. We will see these numbers move quite a bit if the inflation comes in hot or below expectations. So that'll be interesting. We'll report on it tomorrow, of course. Let's talk about some crypto stuff, guys. Big news over the weekend. Bo Hines stepped down from his role in the Trump organization on the crypto end of things. So it says Bo Hines, White House's crypto advisor, announced on Saturday he'll be departing, going back to the private sector. I said, as I return to the private sector, I look forward to continuing my support for crypto as it thrives here in the U.S. And David Sachs came out and said, we're sorely going to miss Bo, but fortunately we have a deep bench at the White House with Patrick Witt, Harry Jung ready to step up and implement the Crypto Council's recommendations and help us get that Clarity Bill passed, the Clarity Act. Of course, the Clarity Act, also known as the Market Structure Bill, is the next big one everyone has their eyes on. There's, some major implications for sure on what could happen with DePIN projects, whether or not they're classified as security or not. So this is something that I think September, October timeframe is what we're looking at to get that passed. But very interesting timing for Bo Hines to step down. I imagine we will see information leak on maybe why this happened, because I would like to get some more insight into what the reasoning was for him leaving, what type of implications that could have. But looking at Bitcoin, man, we got up, I think, yesterday to like 122,000, I believe. Sitting at 118,593. Yeah, over 122,000. So nice to see Bitcoin making another run up, because we were seeing Bitcoin price drop. Ethereum was starting to surge. And generally, when you see Bitcoin dominance start to drop like that, and a lot of money flow into, Ethereum and other large caps, that signals that we could be getting a little bit overheated where, alts could run, but that's normally a pretty big signal, like we saw, last December, where things ran up, but that generally signals that the move up could be coming to a halt, and we could be seeing a decent drop off and correction around the corner. But the fact that Bitcoin is starting to surge back up again would lead me to believe that we probably have more time for these rotations to happen. And that's good. I mean, that means that there's more consolidation, more money flowing in before any big moves take place. Good morning. We're all going to make it, baby. We're all going to make it. Speaking of Bitcoin dominance, we are sitting at about 60%. In the past, for alt season to happen, when we've seen really big alt seasons, like in 2021, we saw this drop all the way down to like 40%. Of course, this is Bitcoin as a percentage of the total crypto market cap. I've said this many times, but I think we got to start considering removing stablecoins from the equation, because as that genius bill is passed, as we start to see stablecoins come on chain, is more so of just a new financial rails mechanism and less so, to invest into our crypto assets. I think we need to consider removing that from the equation. But for now, I mean, still 60%. It is nice to see. We did get all the way up almost to 66% not long ago, back in June. So seeing that drop, we are starting to see rotation of capital, particularly in Ethereum. Ethereum's had a nice run. Now over $4,000. That was that critical level for us to break through. We've seen it hold as support, and that's really good to see for alts. And Ethereum has been seeing some massive inflows. It's interesting. If you look at the Ethereum Treasury companies and you look at CoinGecko, it seems like the numbers aren't quite updated, because this is showing Bitmine owning a total of 833,000. It's showing SharpLink. Of course, these are the number 1 and 2 Treasury, Ethereum Treasuries, at least, 521. But when you look at CoinDesk, they're showing that Bitmine now with Tom Lee is up over 1.2 million ETH in their holdings. And you have SharpLink now closing in on 600,000. So we're seeing these treasury companies certainly make a move. Speaking of Bitmine, though, and I think this is worth looking at, okay, what the price action has done on this thing, because it was not long ago, just June 26th, 1.5 months ago, they were sitting at $4.56, guys. We're up to around $60 today. So it has had a hell of a run. And I think the reason why I bring this up, as we see Solana spot ETFs get launched, I think we're going to start seeing Solana treasury moves. I think we're going to start seeing some companies get into other crypto treasuries. And I think there is definitely money to be made here. Obviously, you can see it here. I mean, that's almost a 15x in the last month and a half. So I think, really keep a close eye on these companies that are starting up treasuries with other crypto assets, in particular, if they're crypto assets that align with spot ETF approvals. So the ones to be looking at, we already know about Ethereum, right? XRP potentially. I'm going to talk more about that in a second, though. But certainly Solana, Doge has a few spot ETFs that are likely going to get approved. There are some companies that are already starting to announce potential Doge treasuries. Those might not be a bad play, because what you see here, when Ethereum makes a big move, if Solana makes a big move, if Doge makes a big move, these treasury companies are looking to do multiples of those moves. So it's a good way to really take advantage of those moves, but definitely more multiples than just holding the underlying asset itself is what we're seeing right now. Now, I still believe that these treasury companies could be the thing that blows up in everyone's face because of the leverage that they're using. Even Vitalik came out and said that last week, like, hey, we need to be really careful about the leverage in these treasury companies. I believe Wendy O is even coming out and saying she's predicting that it could be what pushes us in the next bear market when all this unwinds. But in the meantime, I think there's going to be a lot of money to be had in the coming months looking at these treasury companies and spot ETFs. If you have basically overlap between the two, I think you can get some really good returns. Also, other news with Ethereum, Ferrari said that they're going to start accepting crypto payments in Europe. They already accept Bitcoin, Ether, and USDC in the US. And it said, this is how it works. Basically, they said that using BitPay actually takes the Bitcoin, Ethereum, or USDC and moves it into out of those traditional currencies into USD too. So the Ferrari dealers don't have to deal with the fluctuations. They haven't specified whether or not that's the same BitPay is going to be the same mechanism they use in Europe, but it's definitely interesting. Nonetheless, I mentioned I was going to talk about XRP. And this is something like XRP got completely cleared of all their legal woes. I think it was last week. And everyone's like, how come it's not moving more? Well, they had a 1 billion XRP scheduled release from escrow that happened just 2 days ago on August 9th. So I think that's probably a big reason why we haven't seen more of a move on that news. There's 3 transactions, 500 million XRP to an unknown wallet, 100 million XRP to Ripple, and 400 million to the company. So pretty big unlock there. 3.28 billion into circulation. And I think, again, you would expect that we would have had a bigger move when all the legal woes got cleared up. We haven't seen that big of a move, 3.3% over the last week. And, if you're looking today, still down 1.42%. So nothing crazy on the XRP front, but there are a lot of spot ETFs that are likely going to get approved here in the next month or two. And I would be looking at XRP, Solana, and Doge Treasury companies, because if we see those pile in and we see the spot ETFs approved, I think those Treasury companies in particular could do lots of multiples, kind of like what we're seeing with Ethereum right now. And you start to get ahead of that. One of the other things I talked about recently a couple times and called out as the potential next alpha is the Zora. So they were seeing more created coins than what are the two? Pump.fun and Bonk platforms combined. This is on Base. I think Base is where you need to be looking for some hidden gems. In particular, users can upload a photo or a meme and it creates a coin automatically. And this is one that has been climbing. I covered it like maybe 3 weeks ago. And, I compared it to the market caps of Bonk, of Pump.fun. I'm like, why is this thing so undervalued? When I covered it, I think it was under 0.08. So it's done about a probably 70 to 80% move since I covered it 3 weeks ago. And still, when compared to those other platforms, much lower market cap. FDV fully diluted is 1.3 billion, but this is one that, if there are some dips, might not be a bad play potentially. And lastly, before we get into DePIN and some of the trends that are super exciting, guys, Eric Trump came out, said they're launching Alt. So it's a $1.5 billion offering to establish a transformational World Liberty Financial Treasury strategy. Interesting stuff there. I will probably myself fade that, but who knows? It could do well. I've got not enough plays that I'm involved in. I don't feel the need to get exposure to that, but I do cover it because it could get a lot of attention. Let's talk about some DePIN, guys. Geodnet's finally making a move. In fact, let's pull up the Geodnet chart. Having a hell of a day today. It's kind of been lagging compared to a lot of the other moves that we're in that we talk about. Moved up 8.26% in the last day. Look, their fundamentals are so freaking strong, and they're moving over to Solana. I think that announcement caused a little bit of a sell-off from people on the Polygon side of things, but Geodnet to me, $54 million market cap. It is one of my top holdings in my entire portfolio. I believe it actually is my top DePIN holding right now, even at current prices. So obviously very, very bullish on where Geodnet can go. But let's talk about some trends, guys. Altcoins on Google Trends hitting all-time highs. All-time highs. More than we saw back in 2021. This is a wild trend. This is a worldwide for the last 5 years. But if you look at what we've seen, anytime we've seen a spike like this, March 3rd through 9th, guys, we saw about 2 weeks later, we saw the market top out. We saw a lot of DePIN projects really rip going into late March of 2024. Same thing. We saw this trend spike going into November, December. The market topped out, if you remember, like December 14th, when alt hit their highs. So we are seeing a massive move, and this is generally a leading indicator of money really flowing into alts. This is huge. Okay, this is bigger than we've ever seen. So I think we could be on the verge of a massive capital rotation, maybe unlike what we've seen throughout this market cycle so far into altcoins, because this is a trend we have not seen. And this would, if this continues upward, the next 2 to 3 weeks could be freaking nuts. Okay, we need macro to continue to work with us, though. Okay, we don't want to see any massive sell-offs in the markets. We want CPI to come in at least where we expect it. We don't want it to come in super hot. We need Jerome Powell and Jackson Hole to come out and not say anything crazy, indicate that rate cuts could be coming. Because I think that the melt up leading to the expectation of rate cuts with these trends we're seeing, everything seems to be aligning. But I do think we need to be really careful about our expectations once rates are actually cut. I've been talking about this a lot. I know it's contrarian. Everyone thinks it's going to be so bullish. I'm not so sure, but I think leading up to that, it could be a massive buy the rumor, sell the news event. This is something I talk about like once a month normally, but bull market peak indicators. There's 30 different, I believe 30 different indicators. Not a single one has triggered that would mark the top of the bull market. So we are still nowhere near the top. Now, it is worth mentioning, it happens quickly, guys. Like when you start to see that capital rotation, and actually here's the general capital rotation you see. Bitcoin can run for a while. We're starting to now see Ethereum really make its move. The next would be large caps and Altseason. And I'm not saying, I mean, this market cycle is much different than any other market cycle we've seen. But historically, when we get to this point, phase 3 and phase 4, it can happen really quickly in a matter of weeks to a month or two before things blow off on the top end and we see major corrections, sometimes as much as 80 to 90% down. So while we are seeing the right trends, we need to be really, really conscious of the fact that, you know, these moves don't necessarily last a super long time. They can be a violent move up, but the same is true on the way down. But I think this is one of the most promising things I've seen. Decentralized physical infrastructure network searches. Guys, this is worldwide over the last 5 years. Look at what we're seeing here. All of a sudden, so this move started back last year. This is where we saw that big run up in DePIN. We saw the market top right around here after this move up. Okay, so this is like a week after we saw it top out. Y'all, we are seeing decentralized physical infrastructure network searches exceed what we saw last year. Okay, and again, this preceded the massive rotation into alt, and a lot of DePIN projects pumped super hard. So if this correlation holds again in the next week or two, we could see a huge rotation going into these DePIN projects. And of course, so that was for decentralized physical infrastructure network search term. What about DePIN? When you look at DePIN in particular, same trend. Guys, if you remember, March of 2024 is right when we saw the market top out. So this is, again, 1 to 2 weeks after this peaked is when we saw massive moves in a lot of DePIN projects. The same trend we saw back in November into December. So leading up to the top again. And here we are once again seeing a massive surge in the search terms. Could we see another move like this? I mean, these are perfectly correlated with the tops that we saw in DePIN projects and alts throughout this market cycle so far. So this is a very encouraging trend to see. Again, that we are seeing the searches for altcoins, the searches for DePIN in particular, decentralized physical infrastructure network terms. That's really, I mean, this is exactly what we want to see. Okay. But again, if we start to see massive moves up, just keep in mind, you need to be looking at the fear and greed index, which we can pull up here. Actually, I will pull up this one in particular. This is the one, this alternative one. If you just do a Google search, there's several of them. This is the one that's been the best in predicting the top. Right now we're sitting at, 70. This updates once every day. So this is the one to really, really keep an eye on. Anytime this thing has gotten above 90, it's marked the top within 2 weeks. We saw it right around Thanksgiving. We peaked, 2.5 weeks later. If we look further out, we saw it get above 90 in March, again, of 2024. 2 weeks later, we saw the market peak out. So keep close attention, pay close attention to this fear and greed index. All the search terms that we're seeing that precede the big moves, they're all spiking right now. So in the next 2 weeks, we could see major moves. But when this starts to get to 85, 90, it's normally a sign that within the next week or so, things could drop in a meaningful way. Market makers are going to make their moves and extract value. So you don't want to be stuck holding bags without any profits when that happens. Okay. But let's talk about a couple of DePIN projects. Hivemapper continues to burn tokens. We saw 3.2 million in emissions for the week, 758,000 tokens burned. So 23% burn to emission ratio. Pretty good. I'd love to see this thing get to net deflationary potentially. It would be nice, but it's good to see the burns taking place. This is one that has been kind of sitting around this 2 cent mark. Well, 0.01977. Could this make a big move? I think it could. Again, I'm not going to say we're going to get up to like 33, 34 cents all-time highs, but could we see this thing pump to 10 cents? Yeah, I think so. When the market rebounds. Helium, 1.16 million daily active users, 102,650 mobile hotspots now. They're expanding. I think Helium is poised. Where are they sitting at here? 288. Wasn't long ago I covered this project and it was below $2. This thing is, I think, poised to make a move as well. And one other thing I want to cover tomorrow, if y'all can join, 11 a.m. that's Central Time, noon Eastern Time. Harry Dewhurst, CEO of 375 AI, will be joining the Deep and Connected Space, episode 22. Hard to believe we've been doing that weekly now for 22 episodes. Wow. This is actually my 53rd live stream since I started doing live streams most days. So hitting some milestones, baby, but we are at exciting times right now. Jay Soto said, it's getting interesting. I agree. So look, the last 6 months, we've been getting positioned into these different projects. I think we could look back and be like, man, these were some amazing entry opportunities. If you missed it, if you don't have the capital, don't worry, there will be more opportunities in the future. But I do believe, based on the search terms, based on the rotation we're seeing in Ethereum, what we've seen historically, things seem to be clicking at the right time. And I wouldn't be surprised if, from now leading up to the FOMC meeting in September, if we see a run up. A lot of people are not calling for that because historically August and September have been really bad months for all markets. But I think we have to throw that out the window a little bit because this has been a really unique year. We saw the major sell-off. We're on the trade stuff. We've seen a lot of weird stuff up and down. And we have a lot of capital in the top 10 right now in the stock market. But I think we need to look at a lot of the trends that are taking place. The regulatory environments opening up finally, for crypto. We're seeing these treasury companies. We're seeing so much money flow into the space. I think that we need to be, I don't know. I think we should need to pay attention to the current trends more so than looking at prior, August and September trends. But I am going to be very, very cautious and very much looking at that fear and greed index, because if we see things get really frothy, you're going to see all the people come out of the woodworks. They're like, oh, market's never going to come back down. Q4 is going to be so bullish. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a big correction before that happens. But I am excited, though, over the next month about what we could see, guys. And that's what I got for you today. I will be back tomorrow again. If you can get on that space, though, y'all, I highly, highly encourage you to join. 375 AI is one of my, for a project that hasn't had a token launch yet, one of the ones I'm most excited about. I'd say 375 AI and Exhibits are probably the ones I'm most excited about that I think can be absolute behemoths, ones that I want to get a lot of exposure to. There's a handful of other ones too, but those are the two I'm really keeping an eye on. So if you can make it, it will be recorded as well. But if you can make it, definitely join in, guys. With that said, have a wonderful day. Go outside, get some sun, get some fresh air, get ready for the pump, baby. I think it's coming. Appreciate y'all. Cheers.